Yeah, it's my esteemed pleasure to be speaking about green mining for you guys. This is something that's very near and dear to Mintgreen's heart and very core to our business as well. Thanks for the introduction. I am Colin Sullivan. I'm the president of Mintgreen. We're a tech company with a focus on sustainable mining practices based out of Burnaby, BC. But before we get into green mining, I want to talk a little bit about the psychology around new technology. So we tend to scrutinize new things very carefully and sort of accept and naturalize things that we're familiar with. Like take the cell phone. So, did you know that millennials spend 2.5 hours a day on this each day, just glued to it? I know, I do more. But I mean, the moral hazard maybe goes further beyond that. I mean, we're talking about the phone originally when it came out. People in the early 20th century didn't believe they could have face-to-face conversations anymore because of that. But the real threat is obviously robots and AI. I mean, that's an existential problem that could remove us. I mean, it's bad enough that people are working for Uber and running by algorithms. I mean, there's no Uber in this city, but you know what I'm talking about. But of course, Bitcoin will boil the seas. This is techno panic, and it's going to be okay. So relax and breathe. Let's get to the agenda. All right, so first thing I'm going to get into is what is POW. Now, this is a very savvy crowd, I can tell, but I feel like literacy in this is key. So we'll touch on exactly what it is and how scaling is or isn't a part of the power consumption metric. Is POW here to stay? Can we do better? Our case study in Hemlock, just outside of Agassiz, some low-grade heat applications, as well as some very exciting stuff around district energy, and our green mining philosophy at Mintgreen. So firstly, what is POW? Or rather, what is power's implication to POW? So the Bitcoin protocol can run happily off of just one computer with one CPU running, probably as it did in the early Satoshi days. If that happened today, it would be entirely insecure. However, it can function perfectly fine. Today, we have obviously many computers engaging in mining. This provides a lot of security. These decentralized nodes are able to verify with each other exactly the blockchain is accurate for consensus. But the point here is that scalability of POW is completely irrespective of mining power consumption. Mining power consumption is a function purely of coin value. And so I feel like that skews any sort of comparison of cost per transaction directly. But that said, moving forward, the question of, this is a bit of a mouthful, does systemic efficiency lead to environmental sustainability? And I haven't quite completed my dissertation on this yet, but I think sometimes. In the case of the internet, absolutely. So over time, we saw legacy services like newspapers, magazines, less and less. The internet wasn't created to save trees, but it did save trees as we sort of move more information to online and transfer information online. A similar scenario could be imagined with the effects of our sprawling financial system being somewhat restricted over time. But that's not necessarily the topic of this conversation. Further, when you're talking about POW as part of the ecosystem as far as market cap, it's nearly 80% of the top 20 coins in terms of market cap are POW currencies. So you're talking, obviously, Bitcoin is a large one. We still have Ethereum. They haven't come up with their POS yet. Dash, Zcash, etc. Tokens, I mean, these are your tethers, maybe your XRP, so Ripple, that sort of thing. The only two POS in the top 10 would be, top 20, I should say, were Neo and Cardero, as far as I know. So it's relevant. It's here to stay. The question is, can we do better? And what is the real culprit here? I mean, as I was saying before, we accept certain pieces of technology for what they do. We all know this guy. This is a space heater. It takes a nichrome wire coil, puts some resistance on it, basically turns energy into long wave radiation and makes things hot. But why I bring this up is 29% of all heat from households is generated from electric power. That results in 105 terawatts annually consumed in this way, just in Canada. This is why this is significant. The entire Bitcoin network is about half that. So this is a retail market that Mintgreen has identified as a target. And early on, it was a case. I have electric baseboards in my place. It was a question of, are we going to earn money or are we going to just sort of burn electrons? So we basically ran an ugly-looking GPU here with a nice, stylish ornament and did some tests. Could it heat my house? Was it profitable? And in fact, they went quite well. So moving forward from there, we approached the owner of a resort in Hemlock, BC. So this is a ski resort outside of Agassiz. It's a very remote subalpine region. They have no natural gas lines, so they only get their heat from propane and electricity, making their largest operational cost electricity. So we basically got them to switch from their source to our miners as the heat source and said, hey, let's split the power bill on this. I mean, selling them, the miners didn't make a lot of sense. They weren't necessarily savvy to it. They weren't really comfortable with the risk. But it made a lot of sense to them at the end of the day for just basically getting heat, which they needed, essentially for free. So the system itself needed to be high output because this was very cold. It gets to minus 20 degrees. We had to be reasonably quiet because there were guests in the building elsewhere. We needed remote access to it. It had to be push to start. And it had to be enclosed. It had to be rugged. It had to be very, very stable. And this was the unit that we put up there in a number of these cabins. This is Caddy right here. So it's a high-flow air inline fan at the top. And that's what we did. But aside from that sort of particular heating an actual building, there's lots of low-grade applications that obviously are out there. So one we hear a lot about is most frequently you're looking at for farming applications. Beer in particular has moments where it needs to be imparted a lot of heat, and they also have a big fermentation area which requires a stable temperature as well. So we think of heat as the product, and if we can't sell that product, we're not going to install a mining system. We identify the business synergy, and we really have to adapt the business model depending on what that person or group's technical savvy is, what their feeling is about risk of the space. There's many different ways we can formulate this. But it all has to be done sort of a la carte given, in any given situation. Now, this is something we're very excited about is the district energy opportunities. Now, district energy is something that's really coming on in Vancouver right now. If you're not sure what district energy is, this is basically a hot water system of heavily insulated tubes that goes into buildings and under the streets and heats people and heats buildings and cools them in the winter as well. So this is basically an expanding system. Companies like Creative Energy in Vancouver are involved in this. Lonsdale Energy in North Van. And it's basically a very high efficiency way of heating space. And given that some of the mandates of BC is to get off of natural gas, even for this by 2040, they're going to have to look at other efficient ways of doing it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There's some technical challenges around district energy for crypto mining, most namely the temperature difference. They need to get up about 70 C, which even a very rugged immersion board is not going to be able to do. So it involves a heat pump, and it where you'd basically have your 35 degrees C stepped up with a compressor, but it's a highly efficient system. Now, why this is interesting is because these companies will pay 3 to 4 cents, and yes, they measure it in kilowatt hours, 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour of heat. So when you start out, if you're a miner here, you know that if you're a large consumer, it's around 7 cents out of the wall. You can cut that in half by having a partner in district energy. What else we love about it is continuous loads. There's a base load it needs to fulfill at all times. And so it's constant regardless of what the weather is. And unlike, say, in a building where you would have to vent it at given times of the year, this would be something where we would continually be mining with it. And we're not looking to, like Mintgreen in particular, isn't going to reinvent the wheel on this. This is an existing technology. We're just a novel source for the heat for that. So we're partnering with companies that already do this with wastewater, et cetera. So Mintgreen itself, we have a green mining philosophy. So it's basically, firstly, is the source of the energy green? It must be. In BC, that's quite easy. 95% of our energy comes from green or clean sources. And there must be some sort of off-taker for the heat. So the traditional model that most of large miners are doing is basically scour the globe for the cheapest power price there is anywhere, build the largest facility as possible, and just vent this to atmosphere. And I don't think this is sustainable long-term either for the environment or financially. There's a finite amount of these opportunities. The demand on the electrical system is growing all the time. We're moving off of fossil fuel even with vehicles, and there's going to be more charging applications. So where does the opportunity lie? Well, it's precisely what we talked about at the beginning. Just from the heating applications in residences, it's twice the current Bitcoin network. And that's just in Canada. These opportunities are popping up everywhere. You just have to look a little smaller and decentralize them and use them to heat facilities in practical ways. And you can cut that price in half. And this is absolutely non-finite. Yeah, we were speaking with the director of sustainability at UBC, John Madden, not that John Madden. And he said that 94% of their operational costs were related to heat. And we're talking about 1,000 acres of space. So they've recently instituted a district energy facility. And they've spread that out over the campus somewhat, but there's opportunities for both low grade and also on their district energy lines for this sort of technology. So some closing remarks here. I mean, in my estimation, POW is not going away. The market cap bears that out. I spent 2 years actually doing marketing on the side for a POS coin. It's a great technology. It has tremendous value. Its value proposition is slightly different. It functions a little more like cash and less like an asset. Miners to Mintgreen are, in fact, heaters, and we treat them as such. And I would say that all this tech that's being developed is also equally transferable to traditional servers as well. I think this is an opportunity for us also to have some savvy self-governance. In Canada particularly, this is not something that is strictly monitored or regulated, but if we act as good actors and in a sustainable way, we'll have more say over what this looks like in the future. So I would basically say to challenge the status quo on this type of on the current role of thinking for this. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Colin Sullivan, everyone. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Are you open for questions? Question
Sure.
and answers?
Yeah.
Does anybody here have any questions for Colin? Oh, we have a question right over there, right away.
How do you handle the miners during the summertime when it's hot outside and you cool down the place but you still heat in the place?
So when you're talking about in the case of like a localized low-grade heat, there's no choice but to vent it, which is why we find district energy so interesting, and the fact that the operation can work I'm going to get in trouble because I'm not a mechanical engineer on this, but they can work both in reverse and forward. So there's an opportunity for cooling from it as well if you're imparting heat on the chiller. So they can work kind of both ways. And there's always a constant base load on district energy. And so you wouldn't want to exceed sort of peak loads, but you'd want to sort of fill in the minimum requirements on that.
Are you transporting the heat to a different location, or are you converting it back to electricity and then it's being used?
No, the heat is being used directly. We actually did look at something like that. That's interesting. We had sort of like a low-pressure turbine with a butane type solution in there. You were able to recover about 11%. This is much more direct. You can get up to 75, 80% of it going back into the system itself as heat directly.
How far can you send that?
Well, these lines run miles, and you're basically supplementing their system. So in a district energy, they can run for miles. The pipes are extremely well insulated, but you need to be basically on the line. So your position is very important. Yeah.
We have a question right over here.
Sure.
How do power companies view your technology and your somewhat you have technology that might threaten their business model?
A lot of the energy companies we're talking to, specifically District Energy, they have a mandate to actually wind down some of their natural gas usage. So some of them are going to biomass, that kind of thing. But we're giving them an opportunity to use electricity, but it's now economical to use electricity. So those numbers in terms of what they'll pay for it, like they're open to it. They need this heat, and it's a question of where they're getting it. In the case of Lonsdale Energy, they're already grabbing the heat off of a arena. So there's a chiller system, and so they're actually stepping up some of their heat off of the actual air conditioning unit that's cooling the entire arena. No problem.
Question back there.
You mentioned that there was an issue in the equipment needed to go up to 70 degrees in order to be able to efficiently use it. You were saying that the equipment you were using right now couldn't do it, so you were putting in a heat pump. My question for you is that 70 degrees, are you talking about the differential between room temperature, so it's actually 100 degrees Celsius, or if you had an immersion system that was optimized to run in oil at 70 degrees Celsius, are you saying you could use that directly without needing
Yeah, if you could get the system to run at 70 degrees C, that's an acceptable temperature to take them direct to the line. So that would be ideal. A heat pump is sort of a go-between technology for more sensitive equipment, I would say. I mean, that's the ultimate aim, is to just plug it straight in. And you need a board that be resistant to that temperature. I know some boards can handle being that temperature on the board, but ambient temperatures, they'll have a lot of trouble running in that temperature of fluid. Let's.
So one of the things you always hear is how much more power Bitcoin consumes than like certain countries, standard fund. You're saying so the current network compared to Canada's heat alone is only half?
The current network compared to Canada's electric heat alone is less than half. And that's residential electric heat. That doesn't include large institutional utility heat energy. That's just from the house.
We have a
But
question.
Canada's a big cold country, so. So which system in particular are you speaking about? Okay, well, so for the remote GPU locations, well, we would have some sort of backdoor system to get in there online, and then basically TeamViewer was something we were using in the early goings. We use more secure stuff now, but for the distance, on if you want to go back to the actual. Can I go back? So if you're talking about the individual system here, the caddy, that opens. It's kind of like a mini fridge type scenario, and the gantry actually pulls out. It makes it very easy to work on. That was actually key to our design there. So it pulls out about as deep as it is on a sort of an internal. There's sort of rollers rollers here and here. And so if you need to replace anything, you can. But generally, we were running them for max efficiency and max stability rather than performance, just because we were so far away from them, we didn't have to reset them. And the one-button reset was absolutely key to that as well.
All right. Any other questions? Oh.
So, real quick, is this something that, as like an end user or consumer, I can just buy, for example, for my home, or is this something directly through you guys that you guys take care of and monitor the whole thing?
Caddy itself can be purchased by an end user. There's a bit of a learning curve to it. It's as simple as we could have possibly made it. And our guys will walk anyone through who wants to purchase one of these directly. We have sold numbers of these. But there's also, for our deployments, we use them as well. So the answer to both is yes. No. It depends on how you outfit it. We can talk about that. I mean, that one in particular is sort of the base model with 1066 gigabyte, but you can get much, much more exotic than that. 13.
That's terrific. Any other questions?
Amazing. Great questions, by the way.
Yeah, great questions.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. All right. Colin
Thanks, Pete.
Sullivan. Thank you. That was terrific.